Hey buddy, this is Joel Toppin here, and I'm the designer of a new game that's on GMT Games P500 list called Comancheria. And what I'm going to do in this video is show you some of the core mechanics of the game. We did a write-up for the game, but I think it's real helpful if people can see a little bit about how it plays. If you played Navajo Wars, my first game design in the First Nation series, you will probably find a lot of this game is going to feel similar in some ways. There'll be a familiarity to it, but it is a completely different game, a completely redone engine, because we're trying to model completely different people here. So, without further ado, let me just give you some insight into the game. First of all, the map is it represents a much larger area than Navajo Wars did. It's divided up into 6 territories. Each territory has a die roll symbol next to it. Players of Navajo Wars will be familiar with that concept. In the middle of the Navajo Wars map, there was a territory called Canyon de Chelly. We have something like that here in Comancheria. What I've done here is I've just got a single space special location called Paladuro Canyon, where it's something of a refuge, but be careful, it could turn into a trap late in the game. The spaces, the map spaces in the game are much more literal in this game than in Navajo Wars. In Navajo Wars, the map was highly abstracted. This one, we're going for a much more literal approach. And I should also mention, what you're seeing on the screen is not the most recent. There are a couple edits I did the other day. A few small changes to this. So any of the mechanics I talk about in this, there's going to be a number of things that aren't going to make the final cut in the final product. Also, all of the art here is playtest art. So if you hate it, don't worry, we'll come up with something better. If you love it, don't worry, what we come up with will be just absolutely fantastic. Alright, so you have the map here, you have map spaces, line connections. Line connections that are colored help guide the artificial intelligence that directs enemy actions. There's 4 different enemies in this game, which makes it a little bit different from Navajo Wars. You have enemies that can come from the west, which are yellow, the south, which are green, the east, which are blue, and north, which are gray. The west represents the New Mexican regime, whether it be under the Spanish, the Mexicans, or the Americans. New Mexico, during this time period, 1700 to 1875, tended to have its own little foreign policy, regardless of what Washington or Mexico City had to say. So we kind of treat them as their own entity. They have enemy instruction tokens that will guide their actions. The South represents Spanish Texas and the lower provinces of Mexico proper, and then later the Mexican regime, as well as South Texas, because you can see from the green connections, they will begin expanding up into what is today South Texas. The blue represents the Texas settlements, the settlers that come and basically forge the Republic of Texas, but then later also represents the United States. So they're going to be coming from the east, and we have also there's added another square map space over here, adding a fresh invasion route for the east. So but I don't have an update to that in the vassal module here yet. Okay, so you have south, west, east, north. North is gray. There are no gray line connections. The north represents other native tribes, and specifically like the Arapaho, the Pawnee, Osage, and others, the Southern Cheyenne, and so forth. Tribes that could encroach on the northern boundaries of Comancheria. The gray hexagonal tokens you find on the map are also connected with the north, as it were, even though they might be in the south. Those represent tribes that were living in Comancheria when the Comanche began to invade this area. So, how does all of this work? Well, one of the things that's different here from Navajo Wars is we don't have a card deck that drives gameplay like Navajo Wars. Gameplay here, if someone asked me what's the core mechanic called, the answer is I don't know the name of it. It's something that I just kind of came up with, but it's going to have a similar feel to Navajo Wars. Here's how it works. You begin each turn by selecting an operation. the player selects an operation. The enemy is almost always going to be reactive to the player in this game. But there are some dynamics that you'll see in just a moment that will cause the initiative to bounce back and forth. But you have to select an operation. Like Navajo Wars, there are 3 operations that you can choose from. You can choose to take actions, you can choose planning, or you can choose passage of time. Now what those operations do, is different from Navajo Wars. So I'm going to take you through an operation called Take Actions. That's your heavy lifting operation. On the map right now, you'll see that there is a hexagonal piece with a blue top, red bottom, some teepees on it, and the letter A. That is what's called a rancheria. That is that's a Spanish word that they use to refer to native villages. These are semi-nomadic people, but they did tend to have base camps that stayed in one place for some length of time. Furthermore, the spaces on the map represent very large swaths of territory. So the fact that these hexagonal counters don't move all that often shouldn't encourage you to think that they were not, these people were totally stationary. They were not totally stationary. Alright, well these work a lot like families in Navajo Wars, because over here on the right hand side of the screen there is a Rancheria display, and there is a row for each of the different hexagonal counters. Now inside here there's a resources box that I'm organizing right now, and inside the resources box you have all of the resources and assets that belong to this counter. Wherever this counter is, all these counters and the resources are. And so you can put a lot of stuff into one place by using a rancheria as a hub, if you will. So rancherias are a collection of families, warriors, etc. So inside the resources box, you'll see that I started the game here with 3 bands. Now bands are your mobile guys that are going to go out and accomplish actions for you. And they come in 3 strengths. There are 1 strength bands, 2 strength bands, and 3 strength bands. And I will zoom in so we can see those a little bit better. Alright, there we go. Fully zoomed in. Now 1 strength bands have a strength of 1 on the left, that's the yellow number, but they have a movement rating of 6. They can move very rapidly, and they are your most mobile units, but they're the most fragile. If they take any hit in combat, they are destroyed. 2 strength band is the one you're going to find you're going to use the most in the game. They have some resilience. They can take 2 hits before they're destroyed because they have 2 strength. If it takes a hit, if a 2 strength band takes a hit, it turns into 1 strength band, and so forth. But the mobility is curtailed somewhat, 5 movement points. 3 strength bands are when you really want to put the hurt on something that's not terribly far away from you, because they only have 4 movement points, but the 3 strength is it's a big deal when you go on the warpath. So at the beginning of the game, what we have is 3 2 strength bands in Rancheria A. We also have some horses in here, and we have 2 headmen. There are 2 kinds of headmen that belong to each rancheria. There's a Praibo, which is a respected elder, a civil chief, if you will, and there's a Mahiniana Praibo, which is your war chief, and he's the one that helps you in raids and warpath actions. So what we can do is, before we go ahead and take an action, we can equip our band with horses for more mobility, and we can stack a headman with that band to give him some punch in combat or an edge in diplomacy if we're using the Praibo up here. He's really not as good in war, but he is very useful in diplomacy. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I'm going to take a band and equip him with horses. And we'll put the band on top of the horses to show ownership. I'll zoom out here a little bit. And we take those pieces out of the resources box, and we bring them over here to our rancheria. Now, when we do a take actions operation, we have a choice here. We can either activate 1 rancheria anywhere on the map, wherever it may be, or we can activate 1 band that is outside of a rancheria somewhere. So it's an important decision to make, as you'll see in just a moment. Activating Rancheria allows you to activate multiple bands in one turn, if you will. whereas activating a single band outside of a Rancheria is very limited is what you do, because you're only activating that one band. One thing you need to think about with take actions is during an operation like take actions, at the end of that operation, this marker here on the operation track will eventually begin to move up the track. Okay, at the end of your operation, you roll a die and you look at wherever this take actions counter is. You roll a die, and if you roll less than or equal to where this counter is, then you are forced on your next turn to do a passage of time. And when you finish a passage of time, you roll a die. And if you roll less than or equal to wherever passage of time is on this track, then the game period ends, and if you have not met the victory objective on the history card, then you lose the game. And each of the 4 periods of the game have a victory check that you are going to have to face at some point. But you don't know exactly when, because it could happen any time along this track. So the bottom line is you can only do so many take actions operations before you are forced to do passage of time, and you can only do so many passage of times before you're going to face a victory check. So you are constantly racing the clock to achieve your victory goals in this game. Since take actions is your major operation for accomplishing your victory goals, let's go ahead and take a look at the history card here for the first historic period. And on this card, the victory check objective is that the player must dominate the Upper Arkansas territory and have a Rancheria in a second territory. Since we begin with only one Rancheria, we're going to have to create a second one at some point. So, but first, we have to dominate the Upper Arkansas, which are the purple, the 6 purple spaces here. So how we do that is you dominate an area when only there are Comanche in that territory and there's no tribes or no hostile settlements in there. So we got to get rid of these 2 settlements to dominate the Upper Arkansas. We also have to worry about the Spanish, who could also expand into the Upper Arkansas at the same time. Now, line connections. Let me talk about those before I start moving this guy. Line connections that are dashed are ignored for the enemy. The enemy treats them as though they don't even exist. They are paths that only the Comanche can take. They don't cost you extra movement points, but they are special routes that the player only can use. There are events in the game, however, that will open up some of these routes to the enemy. Alright, so what should we do with this guy? We activated him. We activated the Rancheria first, so we have all those bands can do something in there. We're going to take this first one. We equipped him with horses, and we're going to send him on a bison hunt. It costs 1 movement point to cross this line connection, so he went from 5 movement points down to 4, and we can track that over here if we feel like we can't remember. So he's spent 4 movement points, or spent 1 of his 5 movement points. He's got 4 left. Now, to hunt bison, we do a hunt action, and that costs 3 movement points to do. You have to be in the same space as a bison counter, and you simply spend 3 movement points and take possession of the bison. So we'll go ahead and do that, leaving us with 1 movement point left. Now, with our 1 movement point, we're pretty much limited as what we do. We could stay where we're at, or we can go back to the Rancheria. If we go back to the Rancheria, we can drop off our resources there at the end of this operation, and they could be useful to the other bands in the Rancheria. If we leave him out here, he's further down the road, and during the next take actions, he would be closer to the enemy and be able to inflict some harm on them. However, if you are outside of a Rancheria during the cleanup phase, after you've done your take actions operation, then all of the bands that are outside of a Rancheria, they diminish in strength by 1. So that's kind of a big deal. You can't leave them outside Rancherias for long, or they just degrade in strength. So we got to go ahead and bring this guy back home. So we'll just march him back into the resources box here for his final movement point. And we did that. It cost 1 movement point just basically to move back across that connection, back to the hexagonal counter, and then when he's done, we mark him as finished by flipping him over. He still maintains possession of his horses and bison, so these guys here don't have access to it yet. We're going to take this band here, we're going to equip him with horses, and we're going to bring the Mahimiana Pribo with him, our war chief, and then we're going to send these guys on the warpath. And on second thought, we're going to give them 2 horses. Now, why would I give them 2 horses? Well, because if you have 2 horses, you get a few more movement points, as you'll see. So what I'll do with this guy is I'm going to march him down the road for 1. That leaves him with 4 movement points. And I'll march him into here for 2. I got 3 movement points left. Now I have options for destroying these tribes down here with my band. I could do a raid action, which allows me to take resources from this tribe, steal them, and then bring them back to my Rancheria for use later. I could, and that leaves also a ravaged counter on the tribe. And when the tribe collects a certain number of ravaged counters, it dies. That's how you kill it, is by amassing ravaged counters on them. Another way to put ravage counters on something, but it costs more movement points to do, is the warpath action, and that costs a number of movement points equal to the strength of the band. So that would cost me 2 movement points, leaving me 1 short of enough to get back home. But I brought an extra horse with me, and one of the things you can do with a horse is spend that horse resource, discard it back to the available resources here, and give you an extra movement point. So with the extra horse, I have the ability to get back home. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to spend 2 movement points, and I'm going to go on the warpath. Now to do this, this is a really, really core mechanic of the game. There is a draw cup with what's called success chits in them, success counters. And we draw success counters out of this cup, and if we draw successes, good things happen to us. But there are enemy action point counters in here as well. If we draw those, then the enemy, that's going to trigger the enemy instruction table, and that's how the enemy is going to begin to do things against us. And the more successful we are, the more successes we pull out, the more likely it is that the enemy is going to start responding to our depredations. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 counters out of this cup because I have a strength of 2. But before I do that, I check my headman. I brought along my Mahimiana Pribo with me, which means I look at his headman rating on this track here for headman A. He's got a rating of 2. So I roll a die, and if I roll less than a 2, I get to draw a bonus counter. If I roll less than half of his headman rating, in other words, if I roll 1 here, then I get to draw 2 bonus counters. So I roll a die and I fail. I roll a 5. So I only get to draw 2 counters out. And 1's enemy APs, but 1's a success, so that's good. Alright, so we set the enemy APs aside for now, and we take the success counter and we put it into his headman box. It doesn't go back in the cup. So that means there's 1 last success chit for my upcoming operations. The result of the warpath action is for each success that you pull, you place a number of ravage counters equal to the strength of the warpath band. In this case, he's got a strength of 2, so we're going to place 2 ravage counters on this particular tribe. Okay, now that we've finished placing the ravage counters on this guy, before we can finish spending his movement points, remember he's only got 1 movement point left here to spend. Before we can finish that, we've got to resolve these 2 enemy action points that were drawn during that success check. So, which enemy is going to activate? We got 4 of them here. Here's how we find out. The current history card has a table on it. So we roll a die. In this case, we rolled a 3, which identifies the west. Okay? So we look at the west column, and then we roll a second die to find out which of these counters is going to flip over to an alternate side. And we roll a 1, which is the top counter. So it flips over to a raid strength 4. Well, this is only 2 APs, and we don't have the... there's not enough APs to pay for that, so that's just going to stop the enemy from doing anything this turn. But he's going to leave a 2 counter behind to show that there are 2 enemy APs saved, and this counter, it goes right back in the cup. So the number of enemy APs never really diminishes from the cup, whereas the number of successes will. So next time we do something, it's more likely we're going to trigger something. Now in the game, as you see up here, there are these development cards. Development cards are our way of portraying history, events, as well as culture for the tribe. And there are always 3 of these in play at any time. 3 of them that will be face up in play for each game period. Each game period has its own little mini deck of events and cultural things. Now, at the start of the game, there's 3 events that are that are always going to be face up: Apache War, Ute Alliance, and War of the Spanish Succession. The Apache War, as you see here, what this does is if while you're doing a warpath, if you place a 3rd Ravage counter on a tribe, it removes the tribe from play. So that's a really, really nice event, because normally it takes 4 Ravage counters to get those tribes out of play, and that's not always an easy thing to do. Alright, so that's in play, and you got to take advantage of that while the sun shines here. Because when you do a passage of time operation, all 3 of these cards go away, and then 3 new cards are revealed. So that's how these are going to change. So if we're forced to do a passage of time, we lose all of this stuff. Ute Alliance, during a planning action, you can spend APs to take a card into hand. You can also collect action points, or APs. So that's how you get APs, is by doing a planning operation. But that's also how you get these cards into your hand. And this card here, once you take it into your hand, you can spend it to get a 3-strength band, or you can place it during a warpath to put 2 Ravage counters, additional Ravage counters on any tribe, which could finish somebody off. War of the Spanish Succession, what this does is, while this is in play, Western Raid and Subjugate instructions have no effect. The enemy would still spend the APs, the instruction display would still reset and cycle around, but the effect of the event doesn't, or the instruction does not actually take place. Excuse me. So that is what that's what War of the Spanish Succession will do, and that's why we got to keep an eye on this. Because if this got pulled out of play before this got triggered here, there's no guarantee that the next time the enemy pulls APs out, the West is going to use it. It could be the North, and we could come back to this raid later. So we have to keep an eye on this. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and spend our last movement point with this guy to move him back here. We will spend a horse's counter. It throws it back in the resources box here. So we have 1 fewer horses to our tribe, but that allows us to get back home. And then he is flipped over to his used side. We'll take our final band here, and we'll march out with those guys. And we're going to send him out here. He's got 5 movement points, so that's 1. And we'll send him here for 2. And now we're going to raid. Raid only costs 1 movement point, so we'll go 1, 2, 3. So he's got 2 movement points, enough to get back home. He's got no Paraibo with him to help with the raid. The Paraibo here can't really even help on raids, to be honest with you. Only the Mahimiana Paraibo can help with that. So we're going to go ahead and pull 2 success chits out of the cup, hopefully, because he's got a strength of 2. And here's 1 success. Good. And 2 success. How about that? That's perfect. So both of these go into the out-of-play box. We'll just put it up here. If we'd had a Paraibo with me, now if we had taken this guy with us, he wouldn't have helped us on the raid, but we would have taken this into his possession, which does help him increase in value during a planning operation. So maybe we should have taken him along. Well, you live, you learn. Now, the result of a raid is this. For each success pulled, you can either take 1 captive's counter or 1 horse's counter from the available resources. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take 1 of each. So we get our horses back that we'd spent earlier. You know, we rode some to death, but then we went and stole some from the Plains Apaches. And then we took some captives. Captives are extremely valuable resources, because with those you can always turn back colonial raiders, because they will always not fight you if you're willing to surrender captives. So you can use them basically as for ransom. If you're in a pinch, you can also use them to increase the strength of your tribe. In other words, you can integrate them into your society. Not the best use of captives, but sometimes you have no choice. So we went ahead and took possession of them. We place a one ravaged counter only. If any number of successes were pulled, you only place 1 ravaged on it. And again, the tribe can only be destroyed during warpath actions. So even though there's 3 of those on there, it doesn't go away yet. All right, so 2 movement points are left to him, and he goes home. And we'll go ahead and flip him over. So we have finished our take actions operation here. So we have a couple things that we need to do here. Now that we have used all of our bands that we could have used, if we had any action points, we could use them to flip one of these guys over and do something again with them. And you can do that any number of times as long as you have the action points to spend, but you begin the game with no action points. So we're not going to be able to do that. The next thing we could do is we can go ahead and take the resources that are in the same space as the take action. Sometimes resources will end up here on this track, and so if there are any up here in the same space as the take actions token, it would go into any resources box of any Rancheria. We don't have that in this case, so we'll move on. And the next thing we do is we roll a die to find out if we're forced to do a passage of time, but since we can't roll a 0 or less, nothing will happen there except that the take actions counter will be advanced up the track. So next turn, we are officially under the gun. So you're always going to be able to do one take actions without threat of being forced to do something you don't want to do. And you'll always have one passage of time for sure before you'll be under the gun where you might be facing the victory check. So that concludes the take actions operation. We now do a cleanup, which allows us to then take our bands and flip them over, get all their resources out of them. But before we flip them over, we roll a single die, and if we roll less than the number of finished bands in each Rancheria, then the enemy's going to do an operation for free. So we roll a die, we roll the 6, which is higher than the number of finished bands here in this Rancheria, so we're all good. These guys can all flip over. And now the resources that they had possession of are released. So that concludes one single turn. Now the enemy wasn't terribly active there, but if we'd rolled a 3 or less, then what we would have done is gone down to the history card, rolled a die to find out which one of these guys would have done something. In this case, let's say we rolled a 4, it would have been the west. So what would have happened is you ignore the enemy APs that are stored. They do the topmost instruction for free. But you still roll to see if something flips over. So we'd roll a 5, which would have flipped the piece over to raid. So wow, they're getting really aggressive on us. And then what would have happened is they would have initiated raid. Subject to this event, nothing would have happened except that it would have cycled the instruction display like so. So that is how the enemy can do things in the game, and they can get very active on you quite suddenly. And obviously now with 3 successes out of the cup, our next operations are going to be somewhat perilous. So I'm going to do one last thing with you in this video, and I'm going to show you a planning operation, because that's what I would probably want to do next here. So let's go ahead and walk through a planning operation. The first thing we do is we look at each of our headmen that are in play. So we have these 2 guys are in play, and we roll a die, and if we roll higher than their current value, their current rating here, then they'll go up in strength. So we'll roll for our Pribo, and we rolled a 4, so he becomes a 3 strength Pribo. So he's going up there and moving up the ladder. Now, the Mahimiana Pribo, he's got a rating of 2, but we have 1 success pulled out for him, so we're going to add a +1 modifier for each success that he's collected. So he gets a +1 modifier. If he had had all of these, he would add a +3 modifier. Okay, so that's how that works. In this case, we add 1 to his roll. It's a 4, so he goes up in strength. All right, next, each headman can do a headman action. Now, headman actions, the Pribo only is allowed to, as his sole action, collect action points equal to his rating. So he went up in rating. That's good for us, so he can collect 3 APs. So now we have some action points. Now, the Mahimiana Pribo, he's got a tough call here, because he can either spend an AP to buy this card, or he could use as his elder action, his headman action, excuse me, he could use that to place this success token back in the cup. Why would you want to do that? Because these help you during planning to go up in rating. Well, if the success goes back in the cup, chances are more likely that you'll draw a success rather than something you don't want to draw. It's like putting good cubes back in the bag in Navajo Wars. So In this case, though, this is such an important event to us that we're going to go ahead and spend one of the APs we just collected. And as his sole headman action, he is going to purchase the Ute Alliance and take that into hand. We're not compelled to play it now. You can play it at any time. So, but beware, there's no hand limit. You can collect as many cards as you want, store them up as they come out of this deck. But beware, each deck has at least one event that when it comes into play, when it's revealed, it wipes out all the cards in your hand. So you got to watch out for that. Okay, so we've done our headman action. Next thing we're going to do is we can consolidate the bands in our Headman's Rancheria. We can take our 1 and 2 strength bands and basically paste them together to create 3 strength bands if we want. I don't feel a need to do that at this time. Later on in the game, you'll do that from time to time, so we're not going to do that here. Now, here's the bad thing about planning operations is every time you do a planning operation, all of your bands go down in strength. So, all 3 of these guys become 1 strength bands. Okay. All right. And then you can, like I said, you can take 2 and 3 strength bands and break them down lower if you wanted to. We have all 1 strength band, so we're not going to do that. Now, once this has happened, see, obviously you can do planning only a limited number of times. How are we going to get our bands back up to strength? I'll show you how to do that when we do a passage of time. During passage of time, you'll spend bison counters to create brand new bands, and the strength of the brand new bands are equal to your best headman's rating. So if you have a headman with a rating of 2, 3, or 4, a new band created will have a strength of 2. If he is a 5 or 6 headman, your new bands have a strength of 3, which makes them very resilient to last a long time. Alright, so planning operations, you can only do them a limited number of times, and if you run out of bands, you will lose the game because it will put you in a loop that will cause you to lose the game. So you don't want to run out of band strength. So this will be our only planning operation for a while. Okay, so at the end of the planning operation, once you've diminished in strength, the enemy gets to execute 1 free operation, 1 free instruction. So we roll a die to determine which of the enemies does it, and a 3 means it is the West. So the West will execute an instruction. Instruction number 4 will flip over. So back to peace. The topmost instruction is the one that is resolved, and it is a settle operation, which is not impacted by the War of Spanish Succession. So what we'll do here is we'll place a settlement, and what a settlement does is it goes into a space, a map space that is connected by a yellow line to either the square yellow space or to a pre-existing settlement. Okay, in this case we have a total of 1, 2, 3 possible places. Now this tribe will block placement, so he can't go there. So it's either going to go here or here, and the tiebreaker is the lowest area value, the lowest number associated with that area is where it goes. So this one is going to go into here, and it's going to wipe out the bison in that area, so we can't hunt there anymore. Alright, so they're already starting to move toward the upper Arkansas, so we've got to really step up our efforts to make sure that they can't get in there. Okay, one last thing that you can do during planning action is you can move your rancherias. Rancherias cannot enter a square space, they cannot enter a settlement space, nor may they enter a tribe space. If they enter a space with bison, they don't wipe the bison out. Basically, you can move a number of spaces equal to the number of band strength within your rancheria. So our band strength collectively is 3 here. So he can move up to 3 spaces distant, but he is blocked by the square space here and the 2 tribes here, so the farthest he can move is really there. But that puts us closer to the enemy where we can put some hurt on them. It gives us a little bit more, some more options, especially once we get this guy out of there. Okay, so that is a planning operation, and hopefully this gives you an insight into the game. Well, shoot, let's go ahead and do a passage of time just to show you how a passage of time operation rolls. It's the most, like Navajo Wars, it's the most extensive procedure. There's a number of steps that you walk through step by step, but once you've done it a few times, it's pretty easy to remember. The first thing you do is you spend bison, food, or captive counters in order to create new bands. We haven't collected any food, but we have collected bison. So we go ahead and remove him from play, and we will create a new 2-strength band for the Rancheria A. You might be wondering, well, what is food all about? I thought bison was food. Well, if you do a successful trade operation with a settlement, Squarespace, or tribe, then what you can do is you can trade them one of your bison or one of your horses or something in your possession for food. And what food will do is food will give you 2 bands, whereas bison will only provide you with 1 band during the passage of time. We could spend our captives for another one, but I don't think that that's a good call at this time. It's just really good to use them for ransom purposes. So I'm going to hold on to the captives for now. So next thing we're going to do is we have to check, see if we want to increase any of our bands. I'm going to take our new 2-strength band and combine it with the 1-strength band to create a 3-strength band. And then I'm going to take the 2 1-strengthers and make a single 2-strength. So the 1-strength bands are great for long distance raiding and stuff like that, but we're not set up to do that yet. I need to get these guys out of here. Then those 1-strength bands would have been more useful to us for long distance hunts and so forth. Alright, so now that we've done that, we have to do a death check on our headmen. So we roll against their rating, and if we roll less than their rating, then they die. So 1s and 2s will kill these guys. The top guy rolls a 4 and lives, and our bottom guy rolls a 5 and lives. So that's good. Next, all the successes go back into the cup. So all of these go back into the draw cup. Alright, and if we had a headman die, his rating would go down to 0, and at this point then a new headman would come into play. And what we would do to determine their new rating is we would roll a die and have the result. And so you have the result, round it down to a minimum of 1. So this guy would have been a 1 coming into play. So the highest you could start off with would be by rolling a 6 and becoming a 3. So that's how new headmen would roll at this point. Okay, so now we've put the success counters back in the cup. If there's any resources up here on this track, we would take possession of them. There aren't, so we move on to that. Each tribe and settlement marked with ravage counters rolls for survival. Roll 1 die for each ravage counter. Select the highest roll. So we got 3 ravage counters on here, so we're going to roll 3 dice. And our best roll is a 5. So we select a 5. Make a note of that. And now we roll 1 die for the tribe. And if the tribe rolls equal to, if the tribe or settlement rolls higher than the ravage roll, there's no effect. If he rolls equal to, we have to do this all over again. If he rolls less than, then it dies. And its roll is a 2, and so they are gone. The ravage counters go back to stock, and the tribe is removed. So that opens up a corridor for us. All right, this is good progress for us. Okay, next thing after you've done that is we check to see if there's any peace tribes or peace counters that have been placed from here onto either tribes or settlements. There aren't any. If there are, the peace could end at this point, but we don't have that happening here. So now we have to see if what happens with the bison. So we roll 1 die and identify a territory. We roll a 4, so that identifies Red River. What we'll do is we'll place a bison counter from the available stock into an empty space of the Red River territory, but there are no empty spaces. So what we do instead is we take a bison counter out of Red River territory, and right now I think there's only one, just this one here, and we place it into any territory that or any space that we choose. So we are going to choose to place it right here, which is close to our Rancheria for purposes of hunting. And what that represents is the migration of the bison over time. These bison counters, you start out with a lot of them, but they're eventually going to go away, and you're never going to place them all back on the map. All right, now for each empty space up here where the development cards are, we do this all over again. So we have 1 empty space, so we get to roll for another bison. We roll 3. That's the Lano Estacado, and there is no empty spaces there, so we're going to pull 1 out of here and place it there. So the bison have moved a little bit. They're leaving the areas close to white settlement, and we are maintaining the prairie so that we attract the bison to come where we can hunt them. So that is it for the bison. Next, we take every development card up here and we remove it from play, so they are gone. Some of these will have an effect that says when removed, you do something. So you have to do that at this time. And then one at a time, we reveal counters from the deck. And we trigger any card that says when revealed. Oh no! End of the Ute Alliance. Place 1 available tribe counter into Area 1 of Upper Arkansas. So that's what this does, is it throws this guy right in up there. Wow. Displace any rancheria in Area 1. Wow. So we have to go all the way back there and take care of those guys here. Now, what about the Ute Alliance that we had down here? Well, it didn't take care of our card, so we still have the effect of this. But it turns out that there's a good chunk of the Ute tribe that does not like us now. So now we killed 1 tribe, but we got to whack down 2 more. So that just made our task a little bit trickier. All right, while this is in play, tribe in Area 1 of Upper Arkansas does not count against Comanche dominance in Upper Arkansas. What this basically means is, what I didn't want to have happen is at the end of a passage of time that you be forced to do a history check, to see if you've passed the victory check objective here, and have this thing kill you at the very last second. So the effect on this card is that while this is in play, this does not impact your victory goal. But once this card is removed, then this is going to count. So we are going to have to deal with it at some point. So that is basically a passage of time operation. And so that gives you a good idea of the flow of the game. It's much more tactical than Navajo Wars is. Now we got 2 tribes in play, so we're going to have to start doing a lot of operations here, a lot of take actions, a lot of raiding and warpath, and no doubt that is going to trigger a bunch of this stuff. And what happens is, as the enemy gets rolling on you, there will be a slow shift in initiative that is very it's very perceptive. It'll make you change what you're doing. You have to react to the enemy, and then it looks like you got the bull by the horns again, and then the enemy will do something that forces you to change your plans all over again, and so it will go. And the bison will begin to evaporate. You'll be surprised at how fast the bison will begin to diminish as you hunt them out of necessity, especially as you get more rancherias on the map. One thing I didn't show you about passage of time because we didn't have the strength to do it, but if you have at least 6 strength worth of bands in your rancheria, you can create a second rancheria. Basically, you split it in half. 3 would go here, and at least 3 would have to go into the new rancheria. You can trade resources then between the 2, and the new rancheria would go into an adjacent open space. So that's how you create new rancherias on the map. I think that's about that's the nuts and bolts of the game. There's a lot more to it. We have lots of resources here. I haven't talked about trade goods. They allow you to re-roll or redraw from the draw cup on a 1-for-1 basis. 1 trade goods counter will allow you to get 1 re-roll. You acquire these by trading with the settlements or with the tribes. Trade actions like raiding, except that if you pull a success check out, then they agree to trade with you and they don't attack you. If they're marked with a peace counter, like so, like one of these from here, then you don't have to worry about that at all. If you bring captives with you, the east, the west, and the south will always trade with you if you have captives and you trade those captives. So they're basically allow you free passage into a settlement to trade with them to get trade goods, and guns you can acquire only from the east or from tribes. The west and south won't trade you with firearms, but they will help you in battles. You will have a lot of battles in this game, way more than Navajo Wars, and the tendency early on at least is for you will have an edge in combat, but as time goes on you'll begin to lose that technological edge. So I think the rules weight is slightly lighter than Navajo Wars. I would also say that the playing time is somewhat faster than Navajo Wars. There are 4 periods to the game. There are shorter scenarios where you just play one game period, but I think the full experience is to play the whole thing because each history card transitions you into the next, and the gap in between historic periods isn't always that long. It really depends on how many passage of times that you're allowed to take in this moving along this track. You might be forced into a new period before you want to. So that is Comancheria. It's up on P500. I think the P500 price was like $42. It's going to retail, I think, for $60. So it's a pretty good deal on P500. Appreciate your support. And I'm Joel Toppin. That is Comancheria, and just a little look inside the game there.